Uhuru, Uhuru. Welcome to the Reparations Study Group, first episode, Back to Basics. I am here with our national chair in the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, Jesse Nevel.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Uhuru Jackson, good to be here.
Oh yes, I'm Jackson, a proud member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. So thank you. And also applause to all of you who are tuning in. So welcome. We are the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. We are under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, who formed us, and our three principles of unity are: one, obviously we're under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party; two, we recognize that African people have the right to lead their own struggle; and three, we organize in the white community for reparations to African people. So, welcome. And I first want to begin by saluting our leadership in the African People's Socialist Party. On page 8 of every Burning Spear newspaper, you can see the National Central Committee of the African People's Socialist Party. So if you have your spear, you can turn to that page and see front and center Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Chairman of the African People's Socialist Party and African Socialist International. In fact, there is a Marcus Garvey Legacy Cruise going on this coming weekend for the African Socialist International. Chair Jesse, did you want to say something briefly about that?
I'm very excited for it. I'm going to be attending, as well as a few other people from the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. So it's going to be very powerful. It's an institution that's a fundraiser for the African Socialist International. And there's actually going to be an event in the Bahamas where Chairman Omali Yeshitela is going to be speaking.
Uhuru. So salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela, also the author of Vanguard, the Advanced Detachment of the African Revolution, which is the report to the 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party. So you can purchase that book at burningspearmarketplace.com for more information about the theory of African internationalism that we'll be discussing today. Then I want to salute Ona Zanea Yeshitela, the Deputy Chair of the African People's Socialist Party and the architect of the Black Power Blueprint, which is where all of the reparations that we raise in the Uhuru Solidarity Movement are going towards. So if you are a member and or have donated this year, your reparations just went to building economic development in the Black community. So salute, Uhuru. And also salute Director Akile Anayi, Director of Agitation and Propaganda, who is also the editor-in-chief of the Burning Spear newspaper. And then, of course, salute Chairwoman Penny Hess, who is the author of Overturning the Culture of Violence and the chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, who leads all of the solidarity work and who was the first white person to ever take a stand of reparations and working under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. So salute Chairwoman Penny Hess. Actually, salute and applaud everyone I just mentioned. And then lastly, salute our national chair, Jesse Nevel.
Uhuru.
Uhuru. So we are studying the Burning Spear newspaper for these reparations study, the voice of the African Revolution. And Chair Jesse, did you want to say a little bit about why we study the Burning Spear newspaper?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I really want to thank you, Jackson, for coordinating the reparations study group. And I want to give a shout out to everybody who's watching right now. I understand there's at least 20 people who are tuning in. We're broadcasting on both Facebook and YouTube. So we want you to know we see you, we know you're there, and we want to hear from you throughout this program. We want you to post comments. We want you to, you can even call us, and we'll tell you about that. Yeah, so yeah, what's the number, Jackson?
The number is 727-537-9171.
Yeah, so later on in the show, you can call in, ask questions, participate, and we really want this to be an engaging and interactive process. This is a study and discussion group. So I also want to appreciate the kind of precursor to this reparations study group, which is the Solidarity Spear Study, as it was known, which has been going on for a long time, which Jackson has been hosting and which many of you have been regulars who tuned in every single week to participate. So this is not something that's new, but we wanted to breathe new life into it and really go all out in terms of promoting this and bringing more involvement into these studies. And what I wanted to say, well, first I just want to join in saluting the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party and specifically the chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, Omali Yeshitela. And the Reparations Study Group is, as our tagline says, a study group and discussion group for white people who want to be in solidarity with Black power. who want to be in solidarity with African people inside the US and around the world who are fighting against the conditions that are imposed on them and who are fighting for self-determination, social and economic justice, and power in their own hands. So the philosophy that we study in the reparations study group is called African internationalism. And African internationalism is the political theory developed over many years and continuing to be developed by Chairman Omali Yeshitela. African internationalism is the political theory of the African People's Socialist Party, which guides all of the work of the Uhuru movement. And I know many of you are regulars who know all of this already, but I think it's worth saying again, and including for new people, because we want new people to join, to feel comfortable coming onto these studies and knowing absolutely nothing about the Uhuru movement when you tune in. We hope that by the end of it, you will have a better understanding of what this movement is about. But beyond that, you will feel compelled to learn more, to dig deeper, and find out how you can become a part of it. So just wanted to say a quick thing about why it is so important for us to study. You know, this is one of our goals with the Reparations Study Group, is to build a culture of study within the white community of African internationalism. And this is really important because we're involved in building a movement under the leadership of the African working class, a mass movement within the white community for reparations to African people. And you know, in white society, we are constantly being indoctrinated with the ideology of capitalism and the white ruling class. Mm-hmm. It's not always direct the way it happens, but it happens in a million different ways. It happens every time you watch the news. It happens every time you read the Tampa Bay Times or any other, you know, hideous ruling class newspaper.
Going through the mall and there being Christmas songs playing.
It's constant. It's the barrage of Christmas music at the mall. It's whatever you hear on the radio. It's what you see in the magazines at the grocery store. It's really hard to figure out where it starts and where it ends, the extent to which the ideological programming of parasitic capitalism is pumped into your brain from birth and just reinforced over and over and over and over again. And you know, the chairman says that the ideological underpinning of parasitic capitalism is racism, and that you can't really overestimate the extent to which racism or white nationalism influences our worldview as white people who benefit from the stolen riches of parasitic capitalism. And the Uhuru Solidarity movement is a movement that's involved in building an anti-colonial struggle, building solidarity with the anti-colonial struggle. So we're not actually primarily engaged in a struggle against racism as an ideology, in the sense that where there are many other organizations out there that might host anti-racist education workshops, the end result is that maybe you feel like you're a little less racist, and you know, you have been able to examine your own feelings and thoughts about African people and try to come to some conclusions about that. But the material conditions in the world remain the same. We're still living as white people at the expense of African people, and you know, enjoying a situation where, like in a city like Boston, white families have an average 31,000 times the wealth of the average African family in Boston. And that is an extreme gap, but it's not that different in other parts of the country. And you know, so those conditions stay the same, even though you've unlearned your racism. So this is not another one of those. This is not a place where white people get together and talk about, you know, our feelings and our thoughts and hope to gain some clarity about how we can unlearn racism. But actually, you will end up doing that in the process of joining this study. The only way to really unlearn your racism is to become an African internationalist, because not only do you dispel all of the false notions and concepts that have been, you know, pumped into your consciousness from birth, but you're adopting and embracing a different worldview, which is the worldview of the African working class, the anti-colonial worldview of the revolutionary African working class. And you know, it's not like it's just another way of seeing things. It's the difference between reality and fantasy. Like, this is the truth. This is the truth about how the world got to be the way it is, how it works right now, and what it's going to take to change it. And what we're taught and what we grow up with is a complete lie. So That's why we say that this is not a talk fest. This is a call to arms. It's a call to action. And you know, the purpose of the Reparations Study Group is to build the movement for reparations. That's what it's about.
Uhuru, I really appreciate that, Chair Jesse. And I just want to point out that the African People's Socialist Party, takes political study very seriously. And in fact, it is the first principle of, on page 2 of every Burning Spear newspaper, it has the rules of party discipline. And so these are the rules that the members of the African People's Socialist Party follow. And the very first one is, any party member who does not consciously strive to elevate his or her political understanding has broken party discipline. And so it's taken very seriously because, as Chair Jesse summed up, we have to, see the world as it really is in order to know how to change it.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate, what the chairman has said about how, there's every society has an economic base, and then the superstructure, the culture, is built on top of that. And so that's why, as Chair Jesse was summing up, just learning how to be nice to a black person does not change the economic base and the reasons why that black person is oppressed. And so I'm really looking forward to delving into our study on the 14-point platform of the African People's Socialist Party.
And
but
one other thing I wanted to say on that, Jackson, is that just to mention that the peak of political education and study that you can find in this movement right now happens every Sunday.
Yes.
At 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Chairman Omali Shatela's Facebook page and YouTube of the Burning Spear YouTube channel, which is called Omali Taught Me, which is a study that's actually led by the chairman himself. And he has done, hundreds of these studies over the years, and he continues to do them.
For the past 5 years, I believe? Correct?
Past 5 years, yeah. They're amazing. I mean, he just wrapped up a 10-part series on dialectical materialism, and we want people to watch those studies. This is not a substitute for that. You should definitely watch those studies, and actually part of what we want to do every Thursday is talk about those studies and things that we learn from those studies and how it applies and how it relates to our assignment given to us by the African People's Socialist Party to go back into the white community and organize other white people into the movement for reparations and black power. So that's another thing I wanted to say. And then quickly, just wanted to also comment on the fact that, part of what we want to do, we encourage people to ask questions. If you hear us say a word and you're like, what the hell does that mean? Ask us. And because a big part of what Chairman Omali Shatela is doing right now is he is restoring clarity and definition to words that have just been mutilated out of recognition by opportunists.
Around and
Yeah.
made to mean anything.
Exactly. Like you can be a socialist and you don't, I know of one so-called socialist organization where if you join, they send you a membership packet, and it comes with a membership card which has a definition of socialism on it. Their definition of socialism does not even include the word workers. It's just like power to the people, people's government, something like that. So you have Bernie Sanders running around calling himself a socialist because he wants to become the president of the headquarters of world capitalism, which is the United States, and give the working class $15 an hour minimum wage over a number of years. That's not socialism. And Chairman Omali Shatela has restored some clarity to the definition of socialism, to the definition of revolution, and to the definition of reparations. And he's the only one who has done that. So, that's why another reason why we have to study African internationalism. And these ideas that we study in these reparations study group meetings that we're going to be having, this is not from the brilliance of myself or Jackson. This is from Chairman Omali Shatela and the worldview of the African working class. And that's a really important thing to say, and that's not being modest or something. That's a political point that we're making, that we have hundreds of years of evidence that white people are not going to lead out of the situation that has occurred in the world today. We are responsible for it. The African working class is leading the struggle for revolution, and we have to be under their leadership, and we have to embrace and adopt their worldview and their strategy as our own. So that's what this is about.
And so the Burning Spear newspaper, really sums up, the current events from the perspective of African internationalism, deepening that, politically, and going into the history of, a given topic. There's also Uhuru buzzwords on page 3 of every Burning Spear newspaper. As I mentioned, the rules of party discipline, the 14-point platform in every Burning Spear newspaper, in addition to, the latest topics, the latest events, the latest, things happening in the news around the world, or things things that, really you don't hear in the mainstream white power media. As Chair Jesse said, this is from the perspective of the African working class, the black working class, who, see the world how it really is, being, underneath the pedestal of oppression that we live on. They can, look up and see how the world is, how they experience it is reality, while we are often in our little, white bubbles, not knowing what's going on in Cameroon and Ghana or even in our backyards. So,
Uhuru.
So
the 14 points.
Yes. So let's dive in. It is on page 10 of every Burning Spear newspaper. Of course, we're reading from the December issue. So if you don't have your December issue, you can go to your nearest USM branch or to burningspearmarketplace.com.
And before we jump into this, this is the Burning Spear newspaper. So another thing that we want to accomplish with the Reparations Study Group is to inspire you to buy the spear and sell the spear. And, as this study group develops, we want to even give you the opportunity to call in and let us know how many spears you sold that week and things like that. So, and we can even have socialist competitions and recognize people on the program. So anyway,
yes,
the
here
culture
in
of
St.
spears,
Pete, we
Burning Spear.
USM St. Pete sold 25 in one day last week.
Damn.
So,
all right. Very nice.
Catching up with St. Louis and Portland, who are often the top spear sellers. Shout out to Johan Bedingfield from Clearwater, Florida, Mads Ambrose from Portland, Oregon, Robin Wynn from St. Pete, and many other comrades. Uhuru.
Right on. Uhuru.
All right, so number one, what we believe, the working platform of the African People's Socialist Party, adopted September 23rd, 1979. And number one, if I may.
Go ahead.
We want peace, dignity, and the right to build a prosperous life through our own labor and in our own interests. So if you're just tuning in, this is from the perspective of the African working class. We believe that the U.S. North American government and society were founded on the genocide of Native people, the theft of their land, and the forcible dispersal, enslavement, and colonization of millions of African people. We believe that the present condition of existence for African people within current U.S. borders is colonialism, a condition of existence where a whole people is oppressively dominated by a foreign and alien state power for the purpose of economic exploitation and political advantage. We believe further that this colonial domination is the primary basis of the problems of African people within the U.S., and that we shall know neither peace, prosperity, nor human dignity until this colonialist domination is overthrown and the power over our lives rests in our own hands.
All right, so let's turn this around for a second.
All right.
Flip that. Pop quiz,
Yes.
Jackson. What is colonialism?
Colonialism is the foreign and alien domination of a people economically and politically by a foreign power for economic gain and political advantage.
There you go. So that is the definition of colonialism. It's right there in the very first point of the party's 14-point platform. So that just shows you how fundamental that understanding is to the whole worldview of the African People's Socialist Party, that the condition faced by African people is not racism, which is the ideas in the heads of white people that were created to justify the oppression of African people.
Exactly.
The condition faced by African people is colonialism. So that's very important to understand.
Number two.
Oh, number two, okay. We want the rights to economic development and creative and productive employment, which promote the needs and well-being of our entire people. We believe that colonialism is a blood-sucking system which causes all economic development to benefit the colonialist ruling class state and society at the expense of our colonized people. We also believe that the massive habitual unemployment and underemployment of our people benefit the U.S. colonialist ruling class and capitalist system, and that a struggle by African people for jobs must be combined with a struggle for socialism and independent economic development. And we see that expressed in so many aspects of what the party does, including not the least of which would be the Black Power blueprint,
Exactly.
which is one of the highest expressions of the party's strategy and principle from their platform of building
The second one right there.
Yeah, independent African economic development. So,
Uhuru. Third, we want an end to all local, state, federal, and other taxation of Black people by the U.S. government and any of its agencies. We believe that such taxation is illegitimate, that Black people have no real or meaningful authority within the U.S. government, and that U.S. taxation of African people is therefore taxation without representation. We believe that in the absence of such real or meaningful authority, we have nothing to say about how such monies are used, and that therefore the taxes taken from Black people are often used against us and other oppressed and exploited peoples within the U.S. and around the world. We believe that the use of taxes extracted from the African population to build more prisons to stuff us in and to hire more police to kill us with is criminal, as is the use of these taxes to hire soldiers to intimidate and plunder peoples oppressed by this same system internationally. We also believe African people must refuse to pay taxes to a government which uses such taxes to prop up and support brutal dictators around the world who keep their own peoples oppressed and living in squalor in order to maintain U.S. and Western imperialist economic and political domination.
Okay, let's talk about that for a second, Jack.
Okay.
Why don't you kick it off? What are your thoughts?
Let
Let me ask you a question, if I may. How did you react when you first read this? When you first met the Uhuru movement, you first picked up the Burning Spear newspaper, and you read this platform and that point in particular?
I thought it made sense. I was a little worried about, because I knew that if, it happened abruptly, if African people didn't have more power, I was worried about, it being crushed, that attempt. So I was a little concerned about just the safety of African people if they tried to do that. But I recognized, even way back then, that it's the right thing. So.
Yeah, I felt the same way. The reason I asked is because as an organizer, I'm sure you've encountered, as many of us have, that in organizing other white people, sometimes this is one of the points that sets people off. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, whoa there, I was with you up until the whole Black people shouldn't have to pay taxes thing, which I think is really amazing that somebody could agree that the condition of African people within U.S. borders is existence where a whole people is oppressively dominated by a foreign and alien state power for the purpose of economic exploitation and political advantage, but still think they should pay taxes.
Yeah.
I don't understand that.
Yeah.
So I think what it shows is that if you don't agree with that, you don't really agree with the rest of it. Yeah. Because if you really understand that African people are a colonial subject peoples, then obviously you would be able to understand why African people should not be forced to fund their own oppression and war against all of the oppressed peoples of the world. And by the way, I don't think white people should have to pay taxes or should pay taxes. Because I don't want to do that. I don't want to fund U.S. imperial dominance.
I don't want to fund the lynch mob, the government bombing, people around the world, who bombed MOVE in 1986, 85.
1985.
Thank
you. Yeah, I mean, I know in San Diego, where you used to live, there was actually a movement of tax resistors that was sort of like an anti-war thing. And we think that's great, that people who are anti-war, anti-imperialism should be involved in that kind of thing. But we take it a step further for white people and say, yeah, you can be a tax resistor, but we should be tax resistors for reparations. Exactly. And the money that you would have been sending to the government, to fund their carnage around the planet and within U.S. borders should go towards reparations and material solidarity with the African Revolution. So,
exactly.
Anyway.
Instead of funding the U.S. government, fund the African Revolution.
Exactly. There you go.
Or if you're watching internationally, same thing wherever you are, UK, France, etc.
Yeah. Okay, so am I next?
Yes.
We want the right to free speech and political association, a guarantee of the right to work for for the betterment and emancipation of black people without fear of political imprisonment and the loss of life, limb, and livelihood. We believe that the liberation of African people throughout the world will come primarily as a result of our own efforts. We believe it is our duty to our mothers and fathers, our children, and ourselves to organize ourselves to overcome our oppression. We believe that the rights to organize and speak out against our oppression are basic human rights, and that the U.S. government must discontinue its attempt to smash these rights and must discontinue criminal attacks on those African patriots who work for the betterment and emancipation of our people. Of course, this is from the perspective of the African People's Socialist Party. This is their 14-point platform that guides all of the work of the vanguard party of the African working class. And just to quickly comment on that, I mean, you look at how many African political prisoners are still locked up in the U.S. colonial dungeons within this country from the 1960s, the 1970s, and ongoing. I mean, people like Mumia Abu-Jamal and Sundiata Acoli and so many others who have spent decades locked up in prisons simply for fighting for the liberation of African people.
And tortured and denied medical care.
Exactly. So I totally unite with this. I think this is a really important point. And the Burning Spear newspaper itself is an expression of this particular point on the platform, exerting the right of African people to free speech and political association. The spear is one of the instruments through which they do that.
Exactly, and I think that often, we in the white community, we take it for granted that, if we have a get-together or a party, or if we meet, friends on the corner, or if we, want to, say something out loud at our college, etc., this, right to free speech and the right to, communication, we don't get targeted and, we don't get the treatment of African people when they attempt to do that. The chairman talks about you can't have, 2 or 3 Africans standing on a corner without a police car driving up. We don't experience that in the white community.
Right. Yeah, and the whole question of free speech is something that we also have to understand because, there's the First Amendment that says that people in this country have the right to free speech and political assembly and blah, 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 blah. But obviously that doesn't apply to Africans and colonized people. And really, under imperialism, what free speech means at the end of the day is white people's right to degrade and humiliate African people and other colonized and oppressed peoples. And that's what you see even like with Charlie Hebdo, the magazine in France that ended up coming under attack by people who were engaged in resistance. That magazine was really, really disgusting. I mean, if you Google it, I don't recommend doing it, but if you need to see what kind of atrocious anti-Muslim, anti-Arab, anti-African stuff that they were putting in there, it was like more extreme than something you might find in like a neo-Nazi magazine or something like that. It was more extreme. And when they got attacked, white people flooded the streets, not just in France, in the United States too, saying, I am Charlie, je suis Charlie, and it was they made it a whole issue of free speech. Meanwhile, African people, just for speaking out against their oppression, just for being involved in struggling against their oppression, are put in prison or tortured or worse. So clearly, there's no such thing as free speech in general.
We see Sandra Bland and Corinne Gaines and many others, Darren Seals,
exactly,
attacked by the U.S. And I know we could say more on this, but let's go to number 5. Number 5 of the party's 14-point platform, we want the right to international political and economic association with Africans and all other peoples anywhere on the face of the earth. We believe all black people are African people and are part of a single national entity. We believe that the genuine freedom of African people everywhere is irreversibly linked to the creation of an independent, united, and socialist Africa. We believe the struggle of African people within the U.S. represents the U.S. front of the worldwide movement of African people for African liberation, political independence, and socialist democracy. We believe that the worldwide struggle for African liberation is in unity with the struggles being waged by the majority of the peoples of the world to end the oppression of nations by nations, and to create a new world within which the toiling masses will end the system of workers and bosses, and slaves and slave masters, and will own and benefit from the means and products, I'm going to put on my glasses, of our labor, and will have political authority over our own lives. We believe that the natural, objective friends of our struggle for African liberation, independence, and socialist democracies are all the toiling masses of the world, the people of the Middle East, the Asian and Latin American peasants and workers, the democratic forces throughout Eastern and Western Europe and the US, and the truly socialist states of the world, and that we must therefore have the absolute right to free political and economic international association. Uhuru.
Uhuru. All right.
Anything you would like to say on that, Trey Jesse?
I don't think so.
Okay.
It's very powerful.
Yes. 6?
Well, I guess the only thing I would say is that you can definitely see how the chairman and the African People's Socialist Party has struggled to build international political and economic associations with Africans and other peoples, throughout the world, including even, this cruise that we're about to go on is part of that.
Yes.
It's part of building those associations. The chairman's going to be speaking in Bahamas. The party exists all over Europe. It exists in South Africa and other places. And the party also has long, deep relationships with the Mexican Revolution
Yes.
and the Palestinians and the Iranians and even, Russia. Like this is saying, anybody that can be won to have any kind of strategic support or alliance with the African Revolution, the party has developed and cultivated those relationships. So. All right, so number 6. This is another one that has
yes.
sent some squeamish white people screaming for the hills. We want the immediate and unconditional release of all black people who are presently locked down in U.S. prisons. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Yes. We believe that all the African men and women who are locked down in the U.S. concentration camps, commonly known as prisons, are there due to decisions, laws, and circumstances which were created by aliens and foreigners for their own benefit and as a means of genocidal colonialist control. We believe that these decisions, laws, and circumstances were created and are enforced without our consent and are therefore illegitimate. We believe that the African men and women who are locked down in these concentration camps are victims of U.S. colonialist ruling class justice, which maintains our enslavement and terrorizes our people, and that they should therefore be released immediately to the just representatives of our struggle for liberation, independence, and socialist democracy.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Fully unite with that. African people, have the right to, govern themselves, and this government and those around the world are, kidnapping African people from their communities and from their people. So there's a lot more that we could say on that, but to get through this 14-point platform.
Well,
go ahead.
If I can, I do want to
Yes.
spend a minute on that one, because I think that is almost perhaps even more so than the taxes one.
Oh yeah, definitely more so.
The one that might raise the ire of some people that you might run into when you're out there organizing, when you're selling the burning spear, when you're recruiting your local meetings and stuff like that. So I think it's important for us to be armed on how to engage with that and how to defend that and how to win people to it, And because one of the first questions that comes up is like, well, what about like murderers and like rapists and stuff like that? And there's 2 ways of answering that. One is that it says what it says: the immediate and unconditional release of all black people who are presently locked down in U.S. prisons. So there's no exceptions to that. It doesn't matter if somebody was accused of eating 900 babies, that the immediate and unconditional release of all black people who are presently locked down in U.S. prisons, because they are incarcerated within a colonial, illegitimate prison system. The other way I would respond to it is, sure, I think that the murderers and rapists should be in prison, which is why all these Africans should be released, so that we can make room for like Donald Trump and Bill Clinton and all of them, the whole cabal. Like that, we have to reject this whole notion, this demonization of African people,
Exactly.
that they're the criminals and they're the murderers and they're the dangerous scourge on society. Like that's part of the whole ideological justification of the colonial oppression of African people, and we have to just utterly reject it. And everything that happens in the society happens in the context of colonialism.
Yeah.
People's brains are distorted and their psyches are twisted out of recognition by living under colonial hell. So that's not the point. Like, oh, well, some people should stay locked up. Like, the whole prison system has to be destroyed. The
Yes.
whole thing is an instrument of colonial oppression. The whole thing is illegitimate. It has to be destroyed. And, there's another part of it where it's like, well, it says that they should be turned over to, they should be released and to the just representatives of our struggle for liberation, independence, and socialist democracy. And, I'm not saying you think this, people who are watching, but I've encountered a few people who are like, oh, okay, good, so they'll be re-imprisoned. Like, they'll just hand them over to the African Revolution and they'll be put back in prison. No, I don't think that's the point. I think that every African person who's locked down is a political prisoner. And the conditions that led to their incarceration were political conditions. So they're not going to be turned over to another prison. They're going to be turned over to a revolutionary project of building a new society that would not have the conditions that resulted in them being incarcerated in the first place. So this is a very positive and humane thing that we should be inspired by and very optimistic about and supporting. And I just think it's really easy to agree with it when you understand that the whole thing is in the context of colonialism and the fact like here's how we should understand it. The prison system has nothing to do with crime.
Yes.
Nothing. It has nothing to do with crime. It has nothing to do with stopping murder. It has nothing to do with stopping rape. It has nothing to do with that whatsoever because the majority of people in prison in this country are African. The United States has the largest prison population of any country on the planet Earth. The majority of the people in prison are African. The majority of the Africans who are in prison for nonviolent drug offenses. And the majority of drug users and sellers in this country are white people.
Yeah.
So it has nothing to do with stopping crime, not to mention the fact that crime is a political term to begin with, because crime is anything that challenges the monopoly of violence in the hands of the white ruling class. It's not crime when they send drone strikes to Afghanistan and murder people during weddings, or when they shoot down or chokehold Eric Garner in New York. That's not crime. That's just normal life for colonized people. So the whole thing has to go. The prison system has to go, and the prison industry owes reparations to African people. Let me just close with that.
Uhuru. I completely unite with that. Evan Garner from Asheville, North Carolina said that he's had trouble explaining this demand, and so I'm glad that we have covered it, and I'm sure other people have that same questions about it too, and so I'm really glad that you broke it down, Chair Jesse, for us.
Uhuru.
7. Yes.
Is this you?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
We want complete amnesty for all African political prisoners and prisoners of war from U.S. prisons or their immediate release to... I'm sorry. Yes, this is a different one. We want complete amnesty for all African political prisoners and prisoners of war from U.S. prisons or their immediate release to any friendly country which will accept them and give them political asylum. We believe that U.S. prisons are also used as the illegitimate tool for torturing, murdering, and holding captive those courageous daughters and sons of Africa who, through their patriotic deeds or spoken or written words in support of the cause of our liberation, have become political prisoners and prisoners of war. We believe, along with the majority of the peoples of the world, that it is the duty of the colonized and enslaved to resist slavery and colonialism and to fight for socialism, and those who do so are patriots and heroines and heroes and should be held in the highest esteem.
Uhuru.
And,
free all political prisoners.
Yes, and as it says, it is the duty of the colonized to resist colonialism, is the duty of the colonizer to resist colonialism.
Absolutely.
Uhuru.
All right, number 8. We want the immediate withdrawal of the U.S. police from our oppressed and exploited communities. We believe that the various U.S. police agencies which occupy our communities are arms of the U.S. colonialist state, which is responsible for keeping our people enslaved and terrorized. We believe that the U.S. police agencies do not serve us, but instead represent the first line of U.S. defense against the just struggle of our people for peace, dignity, and socialist democracy. Therefore, we believe the U.S. police is an illegitimate standing army, a colonial army in the African community, and must withdraw immediately from our community to be replaced by our liberation forces, whose struggles in defense of our community and against our oppression demonstrate their loyalty to our community and their willingness to serve in its interest. Black community control of the police.
Exactly. One of the a very strategic and important part of a campaign, rather, of the African People's Socialist Party, the Black is Back Coalition, and other organizations of the Uhuru movement.
Yep.
Uhuru. 9, we want an end to the political and social oppression and economic exploitation of African women. We believe in the absolute, unequivocal political, social, and economic equality of African women and men. We believe that a fundamental test of the progressive or revolutionary character of any organization, party, movement, or society is its commitment, confirmed in practice, to the destruction of the special oppression of women and the elevation of women to the rightful place as equal partners and leaders in the forward motion of the development of human society, and as leaders, makers, and shapers of human history. And if you look again at the photo of the National Central Committee of the African People's Socialist Party, you see many incredible African women leaders on there, such as Columba Ananet, Onezene Shatella, Akile Anai, Dr. Aisha Fields, Yejide Uranmila, and Malika Alexander.
Yep.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Go ahead.
Shall we proceed?
Yes.
Number 10, we want the right to build an African People's Liberation Army. We believe that true freedom, although often taken away, cannot be given to a people. We believe that African people are our own liberators and that we have a right and obligation to build an African People's Liberation Army to defend our political gains, our freedom fighters and communities, and to win our actual freedom from our oppressive colonial slave masters. We believe that neither meaningful freedom, nor guaranteed political and social gains, nor genuine liberation are possible without the assuring existence of an African People's Liberation Army. We believe further that the only legitimate wars are wars of national liberation and wars to oppose imperialist aggression, and that therefore the only legitimate military forces for Black people to serve with are military forces which defend liberty and repel imperialist aggression. Such a force would be the African People's Liberation Army.
Uhuru. I think this is another one that gets a lot of white people hung up on it as well. I know that someone in my family, when first reading over it, commented of like, well, the U.S. isn't going to like that, and well, yeah, the U.S. is not going to like that. But also
not going to like any of this.
I know, but any self-governing people, any self-governing nation has an army first and foremost, and that it says that the only legitimate wars are wars against imperialism. We see the armies of the U.S., of France, etc., used to colonize. So this is the army to support, basically. Do you have words on that, Chair Jesse?
Well, for the sake of time, I will give everybody a little homework assignment and go to theburningspear.com and search for the state. That's all I'm going to say. And do some reading on the state, and we should talk about that next week.
Are you night?
Okay.
We need to make a note on that. All right.
Am I next?
I'm sorry,
No,
I'm
next.
next.
Go ahead.
So 11, we want the U.S. and the international European ruling class and states to pay Africa and African people for the centuries of genocide, oppression, and enslavement of our people. We believe that U.S. and European civilization were born from and are presently maintained by the horrendous theft of human and material resources from Africa and its people. We also believe that this theft of human and material resources is responsible for the present underpopulation and underdevelopment of Africa and her people, and the political servitude, material impoverishment, and cultural discontinuity and disintegration of African people through the world. We believe that African people are due reparations, yes, just economic compensation, billions of dollars, which must be paid to the Organization of African Unity or any other legitimate or international organization of African people for equitable distribution for the development of Africa. We also believe that reparations must be distributed to the various independent African states dispersed throughout the world and to the legitimate representatives of African people forcibly dispersed throughout the world who have not yet won liberation.
Uhuru. So just a quick note on that, and I guess we're running out of time, so I won't spend too much time on this, but I think, just first of all, that's kind of like the question of reparations was in the party's platform from day one. So we often talk about how, the African People's Socialist Party led the struggle to make reparations a household word, and that the popular discussion happening right now about reparations that's happening even, you have Ta-Nehisi Coates, I think is how you say it, and the Atlantic Magazine wrote a big article that got a bunch of acclaim, and then you have, Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren and presidential candidates, and even Evanston, Illinois, city council person just passed a bill to create a reparations fund where revenue from marijuana sales, tax revenue, will be allocated towards supposedly a reparations fund for the black community there. And all of these things would have been unheard of prior to this decades-long protracted campaign that the African People's Socialist Party under Chairman Omali Yeshitela has been engaged in to make reparations a popular mass revolutionary demand. And we usually talk about the 1982 World Tribunal on Reparations in Brooklyn, New York as kind of the starting point for that. But as you can see, it's been there from the very beginning. Reparations was in the party's platform from day one. It has always been in the DNA of the African People's Socialist Party to struggle for reparations as a function of the African Revolution. And the only thing I would say at this point is that since this was written, Chairman Omali Yeshitela developed his understanding and analysis of the class question in Africa and of neocolonialism. And today, he would certainly would not consider the Organization of African Unity as being a legitimate international representation of African people. He came to the conclusion eventually that the Organization of African Unity was actually an organization of the neo-colonial African petty bourgeoisie, and that was part of what led him to create the African Socialist International. So the African Socialist International is the proper, legitimate international representation of African people that would be the just recipient of economic compensation from the former colonial powers. And I just wanted to kind of throw that in there as an update, if you will.
Appreciate that,
this theory is constantly being developed by the chairman and by the party. So.
Uhuru. All right. So we have 3 more points.
Okay.
So 12. Oh, sorry.
I think this one's me.
Sorry. Yes.
Okay. We want an end to the vicious, self-serving U.S. and Western European political, economic, military interference in the affairs of Africa and African people throughout the world. We believe that African people in Africa and elsewhere have a right and responsibility to solve our own problems, free from the unwanted, self-serving interference of U.S. and Western imperialists. We believe that the U.S. and Western imperialist interference in the affairs of our people is designed to maintain the continuation of the theft of our human and material resources and our oppression and impoverishment. We believe that African people must be free to organize and struggle for an end to colonialism and neocolonialism without interference from U.S. and Western imperialism, which supports neocolonialism and colonialism in Africa, the U.S., and elsewhere, and which has deposed progressive and revolutionary African leaders and replaced them with neocolonialist stooges.
3, we want an end to U.S. colonial domination of African people within the U.S. We believe that the primary struggle of African people within the U.S. during this period is to throw off the alien U.S. colonial domination, which is responsible for virtually every hardship imposed on black people by this government that is identifiable as a quote-unquote black problem. We believe that our problems with education, from our inability to control our own schools and determine the education of our children, to the inferior and racist quality of the education we do receive, are caused by colonialism. We believe that our problems with health care, from the absence of black-controlled and operated health clinics and institutions throughout our communities, to the hazardous health conditions imposed on us by poverty and callous government decisions, are caused by colonialism. We believe that our problems with housing, from the unavailability of decent and adequate housing for the majority of our people, to the dilapidated and vermin-infested housing we are forced to live in, are caused by colonialism. We believe that our problems with food and clothing, from the terrible quality and quantity which are imposed on us by blood-sucking merchants, to our inability to produce and distribute them for and among ourselves, are caused by colonialism, where our whole people is dominated and oppressed by a foreign and alien state power for the purpose of economic exploitation and political advantage. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Number 14, the last point on the 14-point platform says, we want the total liberation and unification of Africa under an all-African socialist government. We believe that the total liberation and unification of Africa under an all-African socialist government must be the primary objective of all black revolutionaries throughout the world. It is an objective which, when achieved, will bring about the fulfillment of the aspirations of Africans and people of African descent everywhere. It will at the same time advance the triumph of the international socialist revolution and the onward progress toward communism, under which every society is ordered on the principle of, from each according to his or her ability, to each according to his or her needs. And that is a quote from Kwame Nkrumah.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
I appreciate that, Chair Jesse. Thank you for leading so much of the discussion on the 14-point platform of the African People's Socialist Party. What we want, what we believe. It is the working platform of the African People's Socialist Party, which formed and leads the Uhuru Solidarity movement that we are honored to be a part of, and Chair Jesse leads under the party. So Uhuru. So we have 4 minutes left. So our moderator has been posting the links here. We do have a call-in number, but we have 4 minutes. So if you would like to be the first caller, we may have time for one call. So click that number of 727-537-9171. And if you are not yet a member of the Uhuru Solidarity movement and you have been moved by what you have heard tonight, you can go to uhurusolidarity.org and become a member. You can also donate or do both. It all goes to the Black Power Blueprint, building economic development in the hands of the African liberation movement. So Uhuru. Chair Jesse, any words before we go into announcements?
No, I just really appreciate you, Jackson, and the Reparations Study Group, and also want to appreciate our studio audience and engineer.
Uhuru. Kyle and Amanda and Uhuru, and salute everyone who is watching as well on Facebook and YouTube. Uhuru. Michael is on YouTube, so salute Michael.
All right, Michael.
All right, so let's go to, our next Reparations Study Group is this coming Thursday. As Chair Jesse said, it's going to be on the state. You can RSVP at the link provided as well. I know we're having some technical difficulties with the YouTube, so I'm just pressing in right there so everyone has that. All right, and then we also have, very importantly, the first plenary of the 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party that's going to be here in St. Petersburg, Florida. And it's going to be February 1st through 3rd. It is going to have reports from every section of the Uhuru movement. Of course, the keynote presentation from Chairman Omali Yeshitela himself. And you do not want to miss that. So the link is apspplenary.org. And then we're also having the National Convention of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement this coming April 18th and 19th in St. Louis, Missouri, the headquarters of the Black Power Blueprint. It's going to be in the beautiful Aquaba Hall of the newest Uhuru House of the Black Power Blueprint. So join us there. Uhuru.
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 One other announcement I wanted to make is that starting on December 14th, check your Uhuru Solidarity Movement Facebook page and our website, because we have a special campaign called the 12 Days of Resistance to Holiday Consumerism, a revolutionary alternative to the 12 Days of Christmas.
Much, much better, I think.
Yes, and we will be talking about different things relating to the holiday season from the point of view of African internationalism for 12 days.
So you can go to facebook.com/Uhuru Solidarity or uhurusolidarity.org. Uhuru. All right, so with our 1 minute left, I just want to appreciate everyone who has been tuning in. I want to appreciate I can only see who has commented, so that's why there's more people tuning in on YouTube. But salute Michael, salute Ruby Gittleson, Jeanette Bish Cruz, Johan Bedingfield, Casey Mackey, Amanda Carlozzi, Kyle Weiss, Tama Goldberg Gadini, Evan Garner, Ron Hudson, Baron, Robin, Mads, and everyone else. Uhuru. Yes.
We see, it looks like somebody wants to interview
earlier.
us.
Yes. D. Barron says, I would like to interview you on the Real Democracy Talk Show. Thanks, Daniel. Oh, so it's Daniel Barron. Well, thank you, Daniel, and
Great, we'll be in
appreciate
touch.
you. Wonderful. We'll be in touch with you. And we have a new comment. Okay. All right. Well, we are at 8 p.m. now. Eastern. Yes.
Looked like we had other comments.
That's from our moderator posting links.
We go up.
Okay. Yes, Johan, when we were reading the section on the liberation of Afghan prisoners, says to free all Afghan people, all in all caps. Evans, Ron says, I love the new format and new time.
Good. Uhuru. Thank you for the feedback. And we have from Barron, Mr. Barron, Daniel Roy Wiggler Barron runs for U.S. President to wiggle up barons worldwide to help people by cutting corporations, mafia, and secret societies from the government and move to peace. Okay, so this is a presidential candidate. Okay, shout out to the presidential candidate who tuned in to the Reparations Study Group. Very exciting, and we'll be in touch about the interview. Thank you very much for tuning in and participating.
All right, we're at 8:01. I really want to appreciate you, and unity through
Reparations!
Uhuru!
Uhuru!